my friends. It's tea time, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thank you for giving us just a little bit of your time. As you all know, if you've watched this show long enough, you know that both myself and my co-host, the Dowager Countess Lady Cora, are big fans of the series Downton Abbey, and we thought that it would be fun to kind of take a few minutes here over the course of, between now and when the Downton Abbey, the New Era movie comes out, to kind of break down each season, just give you a little bit of our thoughts about it. And of course, here to do that with me is the Dowager Countess Lady Cora. How are you today, man?
I'm great. I love talking about things that I'm passionate about. And as you and Jeremy know, I haven't seen a lot of things and don't watch a lot of things. But this show, I have loved and gone through, heartache with the characters. I'm very passionate about this show. And so when you asked about doing this, I was very much on board, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, the show is oddly engrossing for a lot of different reasons, and I'm not one that really gets into like soap operas and stuff like that. But being a bit of one of those weirdos that's kind of fascinated with British aristocracy and how it all works, the royal family and all that, I found it kind of interesting. Not to mention the Jon Favreau, the director of Iron Man, is actually a big fan of the series as well. So when I heard that he liked it, I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a go. But let's get into talking about season one. Lady Cora, give us kind of a breakdown of what this season was.
Well, season one is they throw a lot at you, in a first season of a show. But here's a little synopsis of it. Like you said, the first season of Downton Abbey opens with news of the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912. The heir presumptive of the Grantham title and estate was one of the casualties that died that cold April night, and the Crawley family is deeply distressed about this turn of events, mainly because the oldest Crawley daughter, Mary, was engaged to marry him. It seems that when the present Earl, Robert Crawley, married the American-born heiress Cora years ago, her large dowry was lawfully incorporated into the estate's assets to resolve its financial problems, and entailed so that the title and properties of the estate could only be inherited by a male heir. Thus, the daughters of Robert and Cora Crawley would be blocked from any legal claim to the estate. As a result of these events, a distant male cousin named Matthew Crawley is notified that he is the new heir, and he soon arrives at Downton Abbey with his widowed mother, Isabel Crawley. Meanwhile, Mary's attention turns to a visiting Turkish attaché, Kemal Pamuk, that's a mouthful, who unexpectedly dies while in her room for a late romantic rendezvous. Mary quickly summons her maid, Anna, to help her with the aid of her mother, Cora. They move the body back to Pamuk's room. But Edith soon finds out the secret, and always jealous of her older sister, she plans to use this information to destroy Mary's reputation. When she tries and fails, Mary sabotages Edith's interest in a gentleman friend. Meanwhile, sparks are flying between the chauffeur Branson and Sybil after he protects her during a political rally when it turns violent. During this first season of the show, Matthew and Mary also start to fight their growing attraction to one another. Meanwhile, downstairs at Downton, we are introduced to the service staff, and there is also a new valet named Mr. Bates, who has been hired by Lord Grantham, and much to the annoyance of Thomas, the first footman, as he felt he should have received a promotion. Thomas and Miss O'Brien, Countess Grantham's personal maid, join forces to plot against Mr. Bates to get him fired. Then, when Miss O'Brien mistakenly thinks that the Countess is going to replace her, she creates an accident to make the Countess slip and fall while getting out of the bath, thereby causing her to have a miscarriage. Sadly, the child she was carrying was a boy, and now the chances of a direct heir are lost forever to Cora and Robert. Just as life at Downton is returning to normal with Cora recovering, there is a grand garden party. During the party, Lord Grantham receives word that England has entered into World War I, and the episode ends with him announcing the news to the guests. That's the general summary of the season, but like Frank, if you watch this show, it unfolds. To me, it's like a cross between... it's very dramatic, but it's also very artistic and emotional. It's like you said, it captivates you to connect to it. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, there's a moment in episode 2, I believe, um, where Carson's old like vaudeville singing partner shows up and tries to blackmail him for money. And then you have Anna and Bates downstairs laughing about it, saying, "Oh, for a month we're going to have to treat him really nice so he doesn't feel bad." And they laugh about it. And so there are like you said, there are these comedic moments when you least expect it. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that this show very quickly shows you who people are, but lets you decide what to think of them. Because I could ask you, after watching season 1, what is your impression of Mary? And I have my own, and they could be very different, but the way they paint her, she's a bitch. She's a cunning bitch. And even her mother, when she's sitting down and talking to her, saying, "You might consider marrying Matthew." And Mary doesn't want to hear it, and she has to raise her voice to her. And Cora never raises her voice like that. And she goes, "For once in your life, listen to me." But it's just, I don't know. There's these moments that just capture your emotional attention, and you connect with these characters. And I don't know. Did you hate Mary after season 1 like I did, or did you think she was cool?
Uh, I liked the big differences between each of the Crawley daughters. Mary is
Mm-hmm.
very much the oldest, in control, a bit of a chip on her shoulder, where Edith is kind of, she's a bit of the typical middle child throughout most of the series, up until the last couple
Mm-hmm.
episodes where things go really well for her. We'll get to that. But, and the youngest daughter, Sybil, is the one who seems to have the most compassion and the most heart. So they are three
Mm-hmm.
very contrasting personalities to be sisters. And
Yes.
I think it was interesting that Sybil always ends up kind of being the peace broker between
Edith and Mary.
Edith and Mary. And
And
even
that probably wasn't by accident. She probably did it because she saw the need.
yeah, she was a little wise beyond her years. I noticed throughout her run of the series, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's. Did I like Mary? No, it was really easy to
Okay.
hate Mary from the start.
Yes, it is. And that's, I feel
Well,
bad about saying that, but it's true.
you know what's
I
funny?
mean,
It's like her character has one of the more interesting journeys throughout the entire series as a whole. It's like she starts out where she starts out. You know, the person she was supposed to be marrying, he gets killed aboard the Titanic when it sinks, and then you kind of look at the way she reacts to it, and it's very cold and callous. But but
mm-hmm.
but if you understand how the British aristocracy works, that's kind of how
Right.
it goes. These people don't always get a chance to marry for love; they have to kind of marry for status. So for
Yes.
her, that's, I mean, I kind of didn't blame her reacting the way she did, because for her
Mm-hmm.
it was like, oh, I can't do that job now, I have to go do this one, and that's kind of how she approached the whole thing. And I kind of get it, because part of me thinks that in the beginning she really wanted to have like a love. She really wanted to marry somebody that she had a deep connection with, and she kind of resented the fact that that was never going to be in the cards for her. At least, so she thought that it was never going to be in the
Mm-hmm.
cards for her. So maybe that kind of made her a bit bitchy.
Well,
It kind of rubbed her the wrong way and made her act the
I'll
way
be
she acted.
honest. After watching the whole series, I look back now and think Robert, her dad, I think was exactly like Mary, but he was softened by his marriage to Cora. And I think she gets that from her dad and her grandmother. Uh, this like bulldog, like, you know, I don't know. She's something. And kudos to the actress. I'm blanking on her name. Give me a second. Yeah.
Michelle Dockery.
Yeah, she's fucking on point with that. I've seen her in interviews and they're a panel. She's completely different, but she just totally embraced Mary's character in a way that was so impressive. Same thing with the actress who played O'Brien. Like, you know, that woman is not like that. Like, I mean, in Thomas, I mean, there's some really dark characters in this show. And I will say this, if you never watched the show, there's very much an upstairs downstairs feel to it if you watch that series on the BBC. But this, you know, it blends it quite a bit in comparison to upstairs downstairs. And I'll be honest, I really connect more with the downstairs folk than the upstairs folk.
I think most people probably would.
Okay. It's like the first character you see on the very first episode is Bates getting on the train, on the train heading towards the village. And that, to me, looking back, is kind of foreshadowing because he is such an important character in the show. And I don't know. It's just very interesting to me how they blend it all together. And I wouldn't change a thing. Love this show. Well, that's not true. We'll get to it in another chat. The one thing I would change. But yeah, I don't know. Did you connect more with the downstairs than the upstairs?
Obviously I did, because, you know, I'm a regular working class stiff myself, but I think one of the reasons why you can connect just as easily with the Crawley family is because they're humble. You know, Robert does not walk around like he's British aristocracy. He understands that he has a responsibility to the estate. He has a responsibility to the town. And because of that, he's not stuck up. You know what I mean? You know, one of the interesting things about Mary's character, again, is she's not stuck up either. She's just she's very sure about what she wants. She very much believes, like her dad, that, you know, they're there to support Downton, they're there to support the estate. They understand the role that it plays in the area. That's not past her. It's just kind of her approach to life is what's different. But
in other period pieces and portrayals, you don't have that humility and self-awareness in the characters. There's like a sense of entitlement and almost dismissiveness to the people below them. So that, I think, is great, like you're saying. I just and one of my favorite relationships in the whole series is the Violet and Isabel thing, because it's you know, they're so polar opposites, but these characters grow together. And I don't know, I'm very curious in the new movie how that last, you know, scene of those two characters together will go. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to.
The funny thing is they're really kind of the same person. They just have very different approaches. Whereas Violet is very upfront, very brash, and Isabel's a lot more laid back, a little more homey, a little softer. She'll talk to you like a mother talks to people. Whereas Violet, and both these characters are played brilliantly, by the way. And Violet is very, I don't want to say rough. She's just blunt. She's very, very blunt.
She's very modern for the time.
She's very blunt. She's also very logical in her thinking, I noticed. It's like when she finds out like about the Kamal Pamuk thing, it's like she doesn't approach it. She approaches it as like, I know how this is going to affect everything, and here's how I'm going to direct this. It's just she just does it. It's in front of her, so she's dealing with it. She's very direct. And, but again, it's the similarities that always kind of keep these two characters in each other's orbit, even when they're really, really pissed at each other a couple times over the course of the series. That they're always kind of a team. You like the whole thing with the hospital later on, a couple seasons into the show, stuff like that. It's like they're at each other's throats over this stuff, but at the same time,
that's how they kind of introduced her.
Yeah,
they make Isabel be part. They like that scene in the library where I love that it's all men discussing it and they're not in the room at all, but deciding that, well, why don't we just give Isabel something to do. We'll make my mother work with her at the hospital. Well, she's the president, but we'll make her the chairman of the board. And then that scene at the end of episode 2 where they're announcing it, and the poor doctor is like, "This will be so wonderful and in friendship," and they're fucking sitting there glaring at each other like two boxers at a weigh-in in front of everybody, and everybody just sitting there like, this is gonna go very badly. And I'll be honest, if war hadn't come, I'm very curious how different. I think it would have been way different. But of course, World War I comes. But still,
You bring up World War I. One of the things I really liked about the show overall is the way they incorporated real world events into the timeline of the show. And obviously, it starts off in the first few minutes of the very first episode. It's the sinking of the Titanic and how it has this effect on the family because they lost somebody close to them. And it kind of puts them in this precarious situation that makes Matthew the heir and all that. I thought it was really cool the way they incorporated all this stuff. Everything. The first season you get the Titanic, and then it kind of ends with the start of World War I. And then in the second season, it's the effect of
all
World
about
War
the war
I on the Downton estate, on the people involved, and then later on in that season, the Spanish influenza thing that went around the world. It was really interesting to see that even they were kind of at the will of the world and the craziness that happens as the world turns.
And even at the sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just really cool to me. It's one of the things that makes it that helps us kind of attach ourselves to these characters is that despite the fact that they're British aristocracy, they are still kind of one of us. We're all still kind of on the same level as we watch the show. You know what I mean?
And in the very first scene in the movie, besides Bates coming into town, is the news of the Titanic, and you see, and I think this is really important for younger people these days, understanding how information traveled, coming through, and being typed out and with the beep. What is that called again? Why am I blanking? Telegraph. Thank you. See, even I know what it is, but I forget. I don't keep that fresh in my mind. And then having somebody having to bicycle all the way up to the estate to hand it to somebody in paper form after it was typed out on a typewriter. And then decide, Grantham didn't have a Twitter app on a phone in his room. He had, and it's just the look on the faces of the people as they learned about it. And the progression of how you get notified about things, and it really makes you appreciate the age we're in, where you learn things quickly. With that I remember that the first time I saw it. But the other thing I was going to say is Julian Fellows, I believe, is a lover of history, and he intentionally wove the world events into this story because he could very easily have focus so much more on the family and not the world events, but still had them going through the experience of living in that time. But he chose to really focus on the world events in a way that almost feels like an equal character on the show, if that makes sense to you.
And it wasn't just because a lot of shows, what they'll do is they'll have a character reading a newspaper that will have the Titanic sinking on the headline, but it's just happening it's just happened in the world. It kind of gives you a timestamp as to where they are. But these things actually, these things affected the entire world. To a certain extent, the Titanic, and of course World War I, the Spanish influenza, and all these other things that really did have a big effect in the world. These things very much affected people at the Abbey, which made it a lot more real. I've never really liked the fact that they just kind of give these things a passing mention, and it's like, yeah, but it wasn't really important. Yeah, these things were actually kind of important moments in world history that that had a deep effect on a lot of people. Even if it wasn't a direct effect, it was maybe even a secondary effect, but it did affect the way people lived their lives. But this one, I love the way he worked all this actual historical stuff into the story and gave it, helped give the progression of this Crawley family and of all the people downstairs. It gives their lives a different texture, and I thought it was really fun to watch all that.
Yeah, and the love story start for Sybil and Branson, I believe, was a pivotal part of the whole series, which starts in the season of, besides the bond between Carson and Robert Crawley himself being, and Mary and her close connection with the staff in general, there is no real bond or connecting fiber. And I feel like Sybil and Branson falling in love or building a friend, truth be told, I think it's more of a friendship to begin with. Really, I think was a fantastic element because it, in a way, I mean, yeah, down the line, you see the family being really excited for staff getting married and, being a part of their lives, but to truly connect the two in a way, in friendship, let alone more, I think was a really nice touch, and especially tying in the political stuff happening in a historical sense that Julian Fellows likes to highlight. So he did like two amazing things in that. I mean, it would have been kind of boring if all you saw was Lady Sybil going to these events. To see her interaction with Branson and the growth of that connection and how upstairs and downstairs react to it. It reminds me kind of, can't place it, but it just feels like a really important part that we get to see the beginning of in this season.
Also, their relationship, it has effects on the show that last from start to finish.
Yes.
It's, I don't think it's so much of a spoiler. I mean, this was, almost 10 years ago that this show aired for the first time. Actually, I think it was 12 years ago the show aired for the first time. So if you haven't seen it by now, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But even after Sybil dies, it's like that relationship has always got this lingering effect on everything, even up to, and I'm assuming into this new movie that's about to come out. Because I would imagine that one of the things we're going to see is we're going to see
Branson remarries, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. We're probably going to see him dealing with some emotion about moving on from his relationship with Sybil, which he held very close, to this new relationship, which he very much wants, but he's probably going to have some trepidations and emotion about that they're going to explore, which I mean, I expect it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they approach all that. It's going to be interesting to see the writing of that scene, that dialogue and stuff. Because I guarantee, I'm thinking in my head, there's probably going to be some conversation between Robert and Branson about how he has trepidation about moving on from Sybil. Like, she was such a big figure in his life. They got married and had a kid, obviously. He's such a significant part of his life that he feels like he's walking away from. There's probably going to be some dialogue about that. But again, that's because their relationship has got this ripple effect through the entire series.
Well, do you agree with me that it's going through that experience as the sister of Sybil that actually softened Mary enough to be open-minded to marrying someone like Henry Talbot years later? I don't think she would have if she hadn't seen.
Mary's journey is so complicated.
I just feel like the Branson Sybil thing contributed to Mary humbling and also perhaps being open to dating, let alone marrying a commoner like Henry Talbot.
Well, Matthew even says at one point that Mary's a pragmatist. While she may have strong feelings, about anything you might want to talk to her about, in the end, she can step back and see the bigger picture and see, okay, this is going to be the best possible outcome, so I'm just going to go ahead and lean this way. So, yeah, she's very pragmatic about a lot of things. As far as what opened her up to marrying Talbot eventually towards the end of the show, I mean, like I said, her journey was a complicated one, and we're going to get into that as we go on. But
I just think Branson and Sybil was the start of that process of seeing someone of my caliber can be happy, and I think it helped. But I think their relationship shaped a lot of things. I think it freed up a lot of I don't want to say old tension, but old ways of, the upstairs and downstairs feeling like they have to be separate. I feel like it kind of brought everybody together in Downton period.
Yeah, that was a big. Well, it took time because back then your class mattered. Back then, I mean, the rich girl marrying the poor guy. I mean, it makes a little bit more sense now because love is love, but back then, I mean, there was this class thing they worried about in their.
Well, let's be honest. Branson was the chauffeur for a reason because of his accent and where he was from. He probably couldn't have been allowed to be a footman.
Yeah, it's possible.
So, I mean, you see these little idiosyncrasies like that, and I don't know. I just, even within downstairs, there's such a hierarchy or caste system, like Thomas and O'Brien thinking they walk on water and shit. When really, in truth, like, and the scheming about Bates in this first season is so ridiculous. It's just,
it was a bit soap opera-y for me.
Oh goodness!
Yeah, look, they introduced us to a lot of characters that we can not like right from the jump, and one of them is Thomas. Now,
yeah.
I mean, he's such a weird character. You hate him for like 99% of the show. But in the end, you do kind of come up a little satisfied with where he is, a little happy for him, even despite the fact that you just hate him for every episode.
I'll never be happy for O'Brien. I mean, the baby thing.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck her. I
like the fact that she felt guilt over it, especially when she realized what a mistake she made, and we'll get into that, down the line in a minute. Mm. But yeah, she felt remorse, but at the same time, like, you did it. It's like you can feel remorseful for something and still have done something terrible and stupid. But let's talk about Thomas and Philip, the Duke of Crowborough. That whole secret,
that guy's a cunning fuck.
He
used Mary to get the letters.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize it at first. I'm thinking this guy's just really weird, wanting to go up to the rooms and. You could tell how uncomfortable Mary is, but she's trying to, she's in this headspace of, I have to find a husband. I'm going to do anything, and that guy is a cunning fuck. And the actor who played him, fucking on point. Like, that guy he did sleazy well in a way. And the thing is, it's just, yeah, I'll shut up. Yeah. I feel bad for Thomas in this sense, but not others.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. He did sleazy very, very well. I'm trying to pull up a cast list real quick to.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here. Let me find it for you.
It was actually Charlie Cox that played the Duke of Crowborough.
Okay.
He actually, I'm a big fan of him because he played Matt Murdock in the Daredevil series and was actually in Spider-Man No Way Home. He was the guy that was at the table talking to him for a minute, caught the brick, for those of you who are into the MCU. But,
nice.
But yeah, it's Tom. That whole thing was really a lot of setup for Thomas and kind of. There's two. That was his
setup to talk about that he's gay. That was all it was, in my opinion.
There's two different sides to him. There is this side that. Is just to Thomas specifically that he's very conniving, very backstabbing. He is that mean-spirited bitch in all the American soap operas that just does things to be mean. But at the same time, you do try to sympathize with him because you're like, look, being gay in the modern world can still have some hurdles to jump over. Being gay back in the early 1900s, when many countries had it considered it illegal, it was against the law. I mean, you couldn't risk anything without severely, getting punished. So, I mean, I feel sorry for him on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm like, dude, you're such an ass. It's like, you are such an ass. How can I possibly be on your side? And that was kind of always the back and forth as viewers with Thomas. Is like, you hate the way he acts. But you try to feel sorry for him the entire show, even though he's constantly acting like such an ass. But the whole thing with the Duke of Crowborough, it was an interesting setup for his character.
Mary thought it was for her, but really all the guy was there for was to get the letters.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm actually kind of wondering why they didn't explore his character a little more. He's only in the one episode. There's a couple points over the course of this entire series where I'm like, I feel like that plot point should have carried out for more than one episode.
They could have skipped the diplomat thing altogether, in my opinion. I think that was really risque, more so than this. I think, like you said, there's a lot more interesting potential with this storyline if they explored it. But they didn't seem to want to. I don't know. Maybe they were worried about offending people. Who knows?
Yeah,
SJW shit,
there's a lot to go into it. Who the hell knows? But let's talk about Kamal Pamuk. I got to be honest. This is my only real knock on season 1. That whole storyline to me just
so stupid. I just.
It's important for Mary's growth in season 1.
You think so?
I feel like you could have. I feel like you could have had that growth of it differently though, because the whole thing seemed kind of.
It wasn't even about sex, I don't think, for her. I think it was about breaking the convention of what her life is supposed to be after everything changing in a flash with the Titanic and all the repercussions of it. I mean, I enjoyed more watching the horrifically mean banter between her and Matthew at the dinner table in the first couple episodes than I did any of that. And that was more interesting. I don't know. I get that she's gonna have suitors coming around, blah blah blah, but the whole him dying in her bed thing is one, like you said, a point that I could have skipped.
Yeah, it was a little too soap opera-y for me, a little too on the nose.
And it brought out a bad side of her sister. Am I blanking? Edith.
Yeah, Edith. In ratting her out.
She took it too far. I know Edith and Mary had their problems, but that point led to a seasons-long, revenge fest between them. And that's one thing I did not like. Sure, maybe they're not close, but God, did they have to keep sabotaging each other? And it all started with the Pamuk shit. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would have been something else. Who knows?
It seemed like a really silly thing for Edith to do, because she's not just throwing Mary under the bus. She could potentially be ruining her family with this, her entire family with this news. So I was like,
yes, and then later she gets karma with the marigold secret thing.
Yeah,
like karma comes back, with her own secrets. So
yeah, I never understood why. I mean, she didn't think that one all the way through. It was just this impulsive reaction to throw a gut punch to my sister, who I have this odd sibling rivalry with. That's always on the verge of getting violent, but never really does. But I thought it was the whole Kamal Pamuk thing to me. I was like, I understand how it fits in the overall series, but I could have lived with that. Mm-hmm. I would have done it differently. But
100%.
It doesn't take me out of the season. It doesn't take me out of the show. It also has that's something that has ramifications for several seasons. I mean,
yes.
For one, it ends up becoming the bit of information.
And she's engaged to that newspaperman.
Yeah. It ends up,
he uses it against her.
It ends up becoming what Mrs. Bates ends up using to lure Bates back into her clutches. It ends up becoming something that she ends up having to tell Matthew before they get married, and that can blow the whole thing up again, because they had such an easy time getting together for the first 2 seasons. But, I mean, it's something that for the first half of the show was kind of always lingering out there. And
yeah. Do you think the show would have carried well with? I think it would have carried just well without it.
Well, it would all come down to writing. Most movies and television, their strongest thing is writing. That's why I'm a bigger fan of writers than everybody else. But yeah, I mean, I think they probably could have done it a different way and have it work out just as good. But I mean, it's there. Like I said, it doesn't ruin anything for me. It just it's a little bit of a cringe, and then I move on. It happened. Mm-hmm. We also in this season get the first look at a relationship between Sir Anthony Strallan and Edith. Sir Anthony Strallan, who was about 700 years older than her.
Not that much. I mean, I don't know.
Definitely
I hear you.
A fall spring relationship kind of thing.
To be fair, she. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, what did you think of that whole thing of their relationship?
I think Edith was so desperate to find love, and she felt discarded. And, we later find out she was in love with the other one that died on the Titanic, wink, wink, that she loved, but never said anything. I just feel like she is someone to pity a little, because she doesn't, nobody really looks at her that way, and she doesn't feel wanted. And so when someone did, I think she just clung on to it. And she, I mean, life greatly.
Yeah, you said exactly the word that I was going to say. She's desperate. She's so desperate for to have her. I mean, because everybody's so wrapped up in getting Mary, into a marriage because she's the oldest daughter. Sybil.
She doesn't feel valued.
Yeah. Well, she's the middle child. She's got middle child syndrome throughout the entire series.
And so I think she knows that her only escape of Mary is to marry someone and get out of that home and be someone's wife. So she's just, it's her only, I mean, in that day and age, I mean, look how much work it was for her seasons later to go off and run the newspaper without criticism that she's a single woman and that she shouldn't be doing that. So her only option is to get married. So it's fitting that desperate is the word, because she has no other, she can't just go, I'm just gonna, go do my own thing and not get married. She's not allowed to do that. And there's expectation with her family. So
I think the amount
it's fitting.
Yeah, the amount of growth for Edith over the course of this series is by far.
Oh, she's one of my top five characters. For me.
But the interesting thing is she always seems to be chasing Mary. She's trying to get away from Mary, but she's chasing her at the same time.
She's riding Mary's coattails.
It's like, because Anthony Estrella comes into the picture as a potential suitor for Mary, so she goes after him. She takes her little vain shot at trying to get Matthew with the whole thing about going around looking at churches and shit like that. She has the whole thing about how she was really in love with Patrick. It's like she's really trying to chase all of Mary's men. So there is this weird thing about how she's trying to get away from Mary, but at the same time, she wants to be Mary.
She's emulating her with disdain.
Yeah, she wants to be Mary in so many ways by kind of going after the men that she casts aside. It's a weird. She's in this. There's this weird dichotomy to her character, especially like the first half of the series. That is it's sad, but you kind of understand. But it's like
she doesn't seem to find. She doesn't seem to find her voice until she ends up pregnant.
Yeah, that's true.
Motherhood changed her. Yeah. And that kind of thing, I think that's what later on. But in this first season, she's very much the little girl trying to impress her family and be as important as Mary. And so she's trying to be like Mary while she hates Mary.
It's Mary's shadow is a big one. She's a big personality. She is a younger version of Violet.
Yes.
Like, I mean, she's
just so fitting with the upcoming movie.
Yes, she is a younger version of her grandmother, and she's also very blunt, very upfront, very aggressive, very abrasive at times when she doesn't know that maybe a little bit of a softer touch might be what's needed. But she is, and that casts a very, very big shadow, and I think maybe it transfers to Mary a little bit, because even though she has a very different relationship with Violet than she has with Edith, I think even Mary kind of sees the shadow that her grandmother leaves. And she's like, I have to live up to this someday. And maybe that feeds a little bit of her own personal insecurities, and maybe is a reason why she acts the way she does sometimes. She's like, because I have to live up to this example when, 50, 60 years down the line, I have to do this. And I have to, prepare myself now. I have to be very aggressive in making myself strong enough to be able to do what my grandmother does right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this weird transference of anxiety from one living in her shadow to making Edith live in your shadow, and then the anxiety is just kind of trickle down. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I agree. And to me, it's very interesting that even from the beginning of the series, in this first season, that Sybil seems to be kind of off on her own a little and disengaged from the sisterly thing. Sure, they get ready and they talk and they do the meals together. But, like, Sybil's off doing her own thing quite a bit. And she does more with the village, I believe. She does more with connecting with the staff on a personal level, not including Branson and that whole thing, but it seems like from the start of the series, Julian Fellowes was intentionally putting Edith and Mary on one track and Sybil on another. And if you or I remember thinking something of that line before I even knew what was going to come for Sybil. I'll be honest, I didn't think she was going to ever die. I just thought she was going to be off with Branson somewhere. But it's just very interesting to me that this household is so tightly knit, but the way they did the writing, even in the first season, you see other things like, why am I blanking on her name? Hold on, give me a second. Carson's, Mrs. Hughes. So you even see the beginning of Carson and Mrs. Hughes endpoint very early on in the season 1. And I remember thinking, I remember assuming for a short minute they were married. And the Patmore Daisy dynamic, which is fantastic, the faux mother-daughter thing. So even in this first season, so many really important connections are established very well in 7 episodes. I mean, this is really impressive writing.
Yeah.
And editing, by the way, because that there was stuff they cut out or things that they didn't do, whatever. I mean, and we haven't even talked about the costuming, the cinematography, the timing, and the pacing, which is all on point from the get-go. So
I very much want to go see Highclere Castle now.
I've watched the documentaries about it and with the family who lived there, and them talking about how the show saved the property because it brought income in and they were able to restore it. So yeah, it's been fruitful for them in a great way.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I follow a YouTube channel about another estate, the Earl of Sandwich and his family's estate called Mapperton. And they do videos every week, and it's I know this sounds silly, but in my mind, like what Downton could have been, like nowadays, an iteration of that. So, yeah, I would love to see somewhere down the line, some type of TV show or movie where they basically play out what in our modern present day would be what Downton would have been if this fictional world had been real. And it'd be interesting to see. So
yeah, Series 1 ended up receiving, let's see here, 11 Emmy nominations, winning 6 of them, including Outstanding Miniseries and Outstanding Writing. So from the jump, I mean, people recognized how good this show was. I got to admit, for me, like I said, I tried watching it because I'm a big Jon Favreau fan. Everything he's done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and with the Disney Plus Star Wars stuff. But I heard that he was a fan, so I was like, oh, if he likes it, I'll give it a try. I watched the first episode. It didn't catch me at first. It didn't really get me at first. So I just kind of walked away, and then a few months later, I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a try again. And that's when it got me. That's when I got really invested in the characters and stuff like that. Because I watched the first couple episodes, I think. And then when I went back to it, I just started from episode 1 again and went forward. And that was when it kind of finally sunk its teeth into me. But, yeah, it's everything about this show is just so on point. The writing, the characters, the development, the locations are beautiful. It's hard not to. I mean, you could almost just mute this entire series and just watch them walking through the gardens or walking around the estate. It's just the aesthetics are so amazing. It's really a fantastic show to watch. Again, it's a soap opera. Let's not call it what it's not. It's a soap opera, and I'm not generally into the soap opera stuff much. But I mean, again, this is
Dark Shadows without the vampires.
Yeah, yeah. Fair enough. But and to top it off, I mean, look. The acting is fantastic. You've got some big name actors in it already. Hugh Bonneville is huge. Elizabeth McGovern's been huge for a long time. Penelope Wilton is she's in Shaun of the Dead, for those of you who are into the Simon Pegg, Nick Frost stuff. Then, of course, you have, why am I drawing a blank in the name? Theo James has actually been big for a long time. He was in one of the Blade movies. He's been in a lot of action stuff for a long time. And of course, you have Dame Maggie Smith, who is everybody knows is Professor McGonagall, but has been so good at so many things. Yeah, the acting is on point. Dan Stevens has actually gone on to do some pretty cool things. He was in a movie that I really liked called Colossal with Anne Hathaway. If you haven't seen that, it's a really good movie.
I'm mad at him. I won't watch anything of his.
But yeah, it's the cast. It's perfectly cast. I mean, I give the Marvel Cinematic Universe a lot of credit for really killing it in the casting of these roles, and this one is nothing different. And then eventually they bring in some other people. You have Charlie Cox, who went on to a lot bigger things, obviously in the MCU and some other stuff. But then you brought in people like Shirley MacLaine and people like that to kind of fill some supporting roles as the series went on. I mean, the casting has absolutely killed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've said all that we can say about season 1 right now. The next episode.
Oh, there's one more thing I want to add. I fell in love with the dog. I lived for the moments when the dog would show up. Isis. Yeah. I loved it every time I'd watch an episode, I'd wait for that moment when Robert's walking up the walk with Isis, and all the moments when he's coming down the stairs. And yeah, I'm a dog person, and I love the dog moments in this show. So there you go.
The aristocratic British man with his loyal sidekick, his loyal dog.
Yes.
And you don't even know how big a character the dog is until later on when the dog passes away.
Yeah, and I looked it up.
There, and then you're like, wait a minute, what?
I looked it up, and actually, that's a second dog in the fictional world of Robert Crawley. The first one's name was Pharaoh, and then later, when they start actually talking about the dog in dialogue, his name is Isis, and it's a second dog.
Oh, okay.
And evidently, he's given a third dog at some point in fictional 1925 named Tio.
Yeah.
So
there's a whole scene that we'll probably talk about when we get there.
Yeah. So yes, this first season for me was just was amazing, and I couldn't wait to watch season 2. So I'm a big PBS person, and Masterpiece Theater, I've watched almost everything they produce. So when this came out, that's how I heard about it, because I already watched that content. I didn't know anything about Julian Fellows, the hype about it. Otherwise, I just had everything Masterpiece DVR'd. And so I was the weirdo who didn't know about it till it aired. And it just was one of the best short, TV experiences I've had. And I'm very excited they're continuing it with the movie, another movie, which is the reason why we're here talking about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So go check out Downton Abbey series 1. They're called series in Britain. They're not called seasons, but whatever.
Yes.
Either way.
I get it all mixed up. I call it the series, meaning the whole show. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm the same way. I'm sure at several points in this video I've called it both, but whatever. That's what they call it in Britain. We'll call it we'll go ahead and call it seasons because it'll make it easier for our feeble American minds. But go check it out. It's available on Amazon Prime, and I think it's also available on Netflix now as well. I think it has been for the last.
Just buy it because it's fantastic.
Or just go buy it. I mean, I'm not much into physical media anymore, but honestly, I think this may eventually become one of the things I just want to have on DVD or Blu-ray somewhere because I just want to have it. But anyway. Thanks a lot for coming and hanging out with us, talking about Season 1 of Downton Abbey. We'll be back again for a breakdown of Season 2, talking about all the craziness that happens once war hits Downton. Thank you very much. Catch us here on Thursdays, talking about all the stuff going on in the world of entertainment and all the news that's important to all that. Thank you, Lady Cora, for coming and hanging out with me and doing this.
And by the way, I want to add, my name is not based on the show at all.
It's a happy accident.
Yes. When you and I first connected and I came on your show, you gave me that little moniker nickname because you knew I loved the show and I happened to have the name Cora. So, yeah, just small world, right?
Hey, you know what? Happy accidents. Every time you can have a happy accident and make it work.
Maybe we should call you Earl Frank.
Yeah, we could. I'm the Earl of the harsh truth. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
Yes.
Well, the pieces are there. We'll make it work. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And until next time, adios.